Okay, everyone, please take your seats. We're about to start the event. Please take your seats. We're about to start. So good evening, everybody. Welcome to OWASP London Chapter Meetup. Thank you for making this journey. I hope you managed to find it. Okay, because we're a bit outside of central London today, but I hope you're enjoying this venue and you made it despite all the problems with trains and the public transport. We are live streaming this event on YouTube, on OWASP London YouTube channel. And this event is kindly sponsored by Lissell Corporation, so they provided this for us. We're going to invite them to say a couple of words a little bit later. My name is Stepanyan. I'm one of OWASP London chapter leaders. We also have two other chapter leaders, Andre and Sharif, who unfortunately are unwell today and they cannot make it. However, we do have a special guest tonight. We have Grant August, who is a board member of Global OWASP. Grant, do you want to wave? So in case if you want to ask any questions to the OWASP Global Board member, Grant is going to be here answering your questions. So agenda for tonight, I'm going to say a few words about OWASP. Also, we'll give you some news and updates on the upcoming conferences and tell you about a few OWASP projects. Then we're going to have Raz talking about DevSecOps maturity model and how you can bring it from theory to enforcement. Then we're going to have a break. And then after that, Matt is going to talk about very cool application of generative AI. Everyone's talking about AI, but can you make AI to scan your web applications? Can you make AI to scan your network? Apparently you can. And can you ask AI to generate a nice report? Apparently you can, so stick around to find out. And then after that, we are all going to the pub. And the pub is actually in the same building, but it's right at the back. So stick around for drinks and talk to our speakers and us. So who is here for the first time? By show of hands. Wow, lots of people. So I'm really glad you managed to find us. To make sure you don't miss this event again, right? Make sure you visit our webpage. Sign up to the mailing list if you like being emailed when the next event is on. Sign up to the email. Follow us on Twitter. Like us on Facebook. We're also on Meetup. We're also on LinkedIn. Eventbrite now allows you to follow us as well. And we also have a Slack channel on OWASP Slack. If you need an invite to OWASP Slack, do contact me, and I will show you how to get an invite to OWASP Slack. So basically, we're on, I think, most of the social networks, so please follow us to make sure you don't miss the next event. I'm going to play a short video about what is OWASP hopefully the sound will work this time.
OWASP is a nonprofit that stands for the Open Web Application Security Project. OWASP is a community of developers, technologists, and evangelists improving the security of software through tools and resources. OWASP has 100 plus active projects, and new project applications are submitted weekly. Projects are open source and are built by our community of volunteers, people just like you. Community and networking. There are hundreds of local chapters worldwide and thousands of members. Meetings are free and open to everyone. They include training, talks, and networking opportunities. Education and training. OWASP hosts many events each year. They are a great way to improve your skills, build your professional network, and learn about new trends in the industry. One of the many ways you can get involved is to become a member. The membership benefits include discounts for events and trainings, your own OWASP email address and Google Workspace access, a vote in our OWASP Global Board elections, and recently, OWASP added a brand new member benefit, access to hands-on application security training through the OWASP Secure Flag Open Platform. Join us and become a member today.
Yes, so this is our membership. Okay, I need to move to the next slide, otherwise it will play it again. So in terms of membership benefits, there are a few other membership benefits available as well. There is a community version of AppSec Phoenix platform available. We also have Security Journey providing training courses. And we also have Ubiq, which is a cryptography company which is giving special benefits to OWASP members. Of course, one of the main ones is that you get a lot of discounts on various cybersecurity conferences. Those of you attending Black Hat or DEF CON, right, next week in Las Vegas, we actually had a huge discount. So if you're an OWASP member, you can get a discount. Now, OWASP membership costs $50 a year. So depending on the pound to dollar exchange rate, this fluctuates between 36 and 40 plus pounds per year. So it's still quite a good deal. If you're a student, it's only $20 a year. And if you're a company, you can become a corporate sponsor as well and get your logo on OWASP website and bring your swag. Like you can have at our swag table at the back, you'll find not just OWASP branded swag, but OWASP swag provided by our sponsors. Now, OWASP membership, as you have heard, comes with lots of benefits. And apart from the fact we're a great community and give you discounts, don't forget that also OWASP membership is your donation to your local chapter, in this case, us in London, and lots of OWASP projects. One of the advantages, of course, that you can get a vote, and we will have elections in October. Every year, there are OWASP Global Board elections. And what makes OWASP Foundation different from all other kind of, let's say, similar organizations is because the global board of OWASP is you and I, we're all volunteers. Anyone can become a member of OWASP board, provided you get enough votes, right, from the community. And then you will be able to help direct the strategic mission of OWASP for the next couple of years. And there's one extra advantage of becoming an OWASP member. You get this exclusive sticker. I have a I have a whole batch of these stickers, which I believe no one else has because they were discontinued, but I managed to grab a few. And if you sign up for an OWASP membership, go to owas.org/membership, and then see me after the event or during the break and show me the email confirming that you've become a member, I'll give you this sticker for your laptop. So OWASP is great because we're a vendor-neutral community. However, we are supported by lots of organizations all around the world. A lot of them are cybersecurity vendors. We recognize your logos. So great thank you to our sponsors. And if you would like to become a sponsor of OWASP, you can sponsor us, OWASP London chapter, or you can sponsor Global OWASP. It will bring you great benefits. So quick shout out to our chapter supporters. So all these companies have been kindly sponsoring us at OWASP London. And if you would like to sponsor us, please do talk to me, and you will be able to get your logo here. And we also have another bunch of fantastic organizations who have been kindly hosting our meetups. And our last event was at Amazon Prime Video headquarters. And tonight we are in this fantastic venue, kindly sponsored by Lissel. And I am going to ask the CEO, Ivan, to come on stage and say a couple of words. Welcome, Ivan.
Is there a mic here?
Yeah, we'll grab the mic.
There is no need for that. All right, so my name is Ivan Kinash. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Leadcell. It's been a fascinating journey, and it's quite nice to see so many people. We were actually planning to do this 4 years ago, but then COVID happened and lots of other things. So I had been instructed by Sam on the most important bits. So first of all, the food. Please check it out. It's amazing. We've had pizzas from these guys 4 years ago as well, and 2 years ago. Well, for a period of time, it's amazing. It's probably the best pizza that I've ever had. The toilets. So the toilets are just behind me. So if you head out of the Plexel Park, turn right and then turn right. These are the toilets.
There is a sign.
Yes, there is a sign. So perks, you've already mentioned that there is a lot of stuff available there. The pub. So the pub is literally behind that wall on the ground floor. So the way we go there, we exit the building, turn right, and turn right, and turn right. So 3 rights. You'll find it. It's called Four Quarters, and it's a very funny place. If somebody is into gaming machines, they've got lots of them, and they're super cool. Why we're sponsoring this? We actually, the Leadsel began with an open source project that's called JCardSim. So we understand the pain. And this is a good opportunity for us to pay back to the community because, I mean, the stuff that OWASP is doing is crucial. It's crucial for the industry because it interlinks the entire cybersecurity field, especially when it comes to application security. So, yeah, just to reiterate, yeah, open source is hard, non-commercial stuff is hard. And this is why we're just kind of doing that to show that we care and to give a message, a right message to organizations around the world that it should be not super like marketing bullshitty. It should be real. It should be like it should deliver some value. And please contribute. OWASP again is an amazing organization. If you can do something for OWASP, please do. And the community is just amazing. So yeah, and it's around the world as well. So if you want to go to California, for example, just go see some people and other places on the map. That's an amazing way to do so. I'll just say a couple of words about JCardSim. So JCardSim is a simulator for Java card. It's used around the world. It's used in universities for people to dive into Java card technology and understand how to design, test, and prototype applets. So yeah, if you are into smart cards, if you are doing something related to that, you're probably familiar with JCardSim. But if you're not, please explore. And I think this is it.
Talk to us QR code. What can people get from
the
QR code?
So the QR code is essentially leading to a lot of different things. It leads to our LinkedIn page. What we actually do as well, what we've seen, so we're probably one of the oldest companies in mobile application security world, and we've seen the whole journey from like prevention of decompilation and stuff like that all the way down to dynamic instrumentation. So the thing that we've come up with is actually to breach OWASP stuff because developers sometimes they get confused. They see all these lines with magical numbers and magical definitions, but they struggle to understand how to implement these measures. So what we are trying to do, we're trying to design a readable guide for ideally people with different backgrounds for them to understand how they design applications securely. So if you have any thoughts, if you've got something to contribute as well, please, that's very, very appreciated and welcome. So yeah, go explore that. And I think I'll just end it here. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you, Ivan, and thank you for hosting us. Right, so just quickly to mention, for those of you who are OWASP members, we do have a membership portal, and which is available at members.owasp.org. And one thing which I started doing this year is, apart from giving you a real sticker you can stick on your laptop, I'm also giving you a digital sticker, or a free proof of attendance NFT. Those of you into blockchain, or maybe not into blockchain, there is a protocol called Proof of Attendance Protocol. And what it allows you to do, it allows you to receive digitally signed proof that you were here in person at this event. In order to collect this NFT, you have to see me and scan a one-time QR code from my phone. That's the only way to get this. But then it kind of acts as a digital memorabilia that you were here. But what we're going to do, once you collect some of these stickers, so you can see we had quite a few of those. We'll also run 2 Capture the Flag tournaments, so you can see they looked a bit cooler, right? But if you start capturing, like Pokemon balls, our Pokemon NFTs, proof of attendance NFTs, after you collect a certain number, and you can actually prove to us, and you can prove to anyone in the world that you attended a number of events, we're going to start giving you some really interesting benefits. We're going to give you some prizes, and we're going to invite you to dinners with some very interesting people like CISOs in interesting industry, when you can talk about application security problems. So that is another reason why you should get one of those. So in order to get the NFT, you need a cryptocurrency wallet app, which supports NFT and Gnosis blockchain. You can only collect it from me. If you don't yet have a crypto wallet, that's okay. You can still scan the QR code and then send it to your email address. But then you can download any crypto wallet app, and basically you have to copy-paste the wallet address into this web page to make sure that you get the NFT. If you don't have a crypto wallet, you can try several ones. So for example, you can try Coinbase, or Trust Wallet is a good non-custodial wallet, which is open source, and it's available for both Android and iOS. And yeah, start collecting this. I think this is great. Another thing to mention, we do have a merch store. So if you want to support OWASP by buying some of our branded merch, you can do it. There's delivery worldwide. There's a number of items available there, owasp.org/store. Now, events coming up. The big event coming up is in Singapore. As you know, OWASP runs 3 big international conferences per year. There's one in Europe, there's one in Asia, and there's one in America. We had one in Europe earlier this year. In February, we had Global AppSec in Dublin. Now we are going to have Global AppSec in Singapore in October, 4th of October, 4th and 5th of October. So that is for you if you want to travel to Singapore, or you know someone who is based in Asia, right? I think that will be a great conference. Then another big conference is going to be in USA, in Washington, D.C., and that's going to be 30th and 31st of October. I'm actually going to be speaking there, so I will be there myself, in case if you want to come and join as well. So again, if you work for a company and you want to train your employees, you want to make sure they get some fantastic learning from talks from speakers, there are going to be lots of speakers across multiple tracks at both these conferences. And there's also going to be a training. So your only way to get official OWASP training for your employees is actually to get people to attend these conferences and attend the training. This year at Washington, D.C., they're doing something strange, because usually when we have an OWASP Global AppSec conference, we first have 3 days of training, and then we have 2 days of conference. In Washington, D.C., it's reversed. So first we have 2 days of conference talks, and then we have 3 days of training. So just so you know, if you've done a few of them, it's in the reverse order. So these conferences are paid conferences, and this is the main fundraising for OWASP. So again, they are much, much cheaper than many other conferences, so it's not going to cost you like $4,000 like other conferences. It's still great value for money, and also the training is also very good value for money to attend. Now, any Italians in the house? I know at least one. There you go. Italians, you have a great conference in Milan. So there will be a free, absolutely free AppSec Day in Milan. On September 11th, there's a full day of talks. Scan the QR code if you want to register, find out who is speaking. It's going to be in the Politecnico di Milano, so it'll be Polytechnic University of Milan, September 11th. So if you're going to be in Italy, we're going to be in Milan in September. It's a great event to attend. I think there's a mixture of talks in Italian and English as well. So, I think it's quite great to see that the OWASP Milan chapter is organizing this, because we used to have OWASP Italy Day pre-pandemic quite frequently. Now, quick conversation about OWASP projects. OWASP has 250 plus, I think 290 last time I checked, free and open source projects, which will help you in all aspects of your life, starting from OWASP Top 10, OWASP ASVS, OWASP Dependency Check, Dependency Track. There's, of course, Mobile Security Testing Guide, right? The company which hosts us tonight is a mobile security company, and if you're interested in this. So lots of great projects. One thing I need to say about OWASP ZAP, I'm not sure if you've seen the latest announcement on the social media. Unfortunately, the project leaders of OWASP ZAP decided to move their project to the Linux Foundation. And one of the reasons is funding, because obviously ZAP is probably one of the most, let's say, demanding projects in terms of maintenance. And we need to make sure that there's someone who is properly paid to maintain it. And unfortunately, OWASP funding suffered a lot in the past couple of years due to pandemic. So you can help us to make sure that you donate, you participate in the conferences, and of course just collaborate on the chapters, because we are volunteers, right? Everything is driven by a volunteer effort, and for things which require money, we need fundraising to be done. Now, one OWASP project which I want to bring your attention to is the top 10 for large language models. And of course, today the second talk is going to be AI. The version 1 is out. You can scan the QR to download the PDF. I think it's amazing effort. It's just driven by Steve Wilson. We now have a brand new OWASP top 10 for AI. There you go, there. So you can take the picture with QR. So, thank you. Now, and a bit of a personal announcement as well, because OWASP runs every year so-called WASP Awards, or Web Application Security of the Year. Those of you who are OWASP members receive a ballot where you can vote for the person of the year in various categories. And I found out that I was nominated by someone. I have no idea who that was, but hey, if you like what I do, you can vote for me. Thank you. Then a quick plug about OWASP Chat GRE. So OWASP Chat GRE is a project created by Sharif Mansour, who is our OWASP London co-leader, and Spiros Gasteratos, who is another very active guy in our community. So go and check it out. If you're an OWASP member, you can chat to this chatbot. You go to OpenCRE/chatbot. You have to log in with your OWASP credentials, and then you can ask various questions about application security, and it will give you an answer. Now, today, how to ask your questions, because quite a few of you, we will be taking questions with the microphone, but if you have some questions, please use a Slido system. The event code is OWASP, so you can just type OWASP and ask your questions, and we will try to make sure that the speakers answer them, but also stick around until the end of the event to make sure that you can ask more questions. I'm going to introduce the first speaker, Raz, who flew all the way from Tel Aviv to be here and speak to us. While Raz is setting up her laptop, I want to say that there is a little QR code that the company she works with provided, because there will be AirPods to win, and this is the raffle. She will show it again as well. So Raz, if you please come on stage and set up your laptop, and I will, while you are setting up your laptop. There you go, welcome Raz. So Raz is the Fullstack Engineer at Jit.io, which is an Israeli startup.
No.
Not anymore?
I'm not a Fullstack Engineer, I'm a Solution Engineer.
You're a Solution Engineer, right? But Raz also has fantastic background in cybersecurity from Israeli Defense Force. As you know, both men and women, they have to serve in the army in Israel. And Raz was a member of Elite Unit 81,
Yes.
which has to deal with cybersecurity and cyber weapons. And I think Raz played a big role in making sure that attracting more women to the domain of cybersecurity and make sure that it's diverse. And yeah, fantastic. Welcome, Raz. Thank you very much for flying all the way to London.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I'm very, very excited to be speaking with you all today, and it's super nice to see familiar faces from other OWASP events. Hopefully you're enjoying London and you enjoy the amazing pizza. And I know it's a bit of a tough hour, so I will try to wake you up a little bit, and I hope I succeed. So let's get started. So today I want to talk about DSOMM, which is the DevSecOps maturity model, the OWASP DevSecOps maturity model. I will talk a little bit about maturity models, and then we will get into the actual practical details of DSOMM. But before we dive in, I know that some people might say, like, hey, this is not a representation of my company. But quite frankly, this is just me bringing forward a lot of the learnings that we've had at JIT when we implemented DSOMM in our dev organization, and I just want to bring forward those learning from our experience, and I'm very excited to share it with you all today. So before we actually dive in, I think that we need to do a quick introduction. So Sam did most of the introduction, but I will do a little bit more. So my name is Raz Probstein. I'm a solution engineer at JIT. I've actually started as a full-stack engineer, and I've been a full-stack engineer for many years. I joined JIT about a year ago, and after 8 months at this position, I've decided to shift things up, and I became a solution engineer. I'm studying for my bachelor's in biotechnology, and I'm a big foodie, so that's a bit about me. And I will tell you about JIT as well. JIT is an open DevSecOps orchestration platform. We're helping modern dev organizations own their application security without hurting their dev velocity. We're automating a lot of open source security tools, and that's a bit about us as well. So let's talk about DSOMM from theory to enforcement. So we are going to dive in a little bit to maturity models in general, because I think it's important for us to kind of set the baseline here of what a maturity model is. Then we will get into what DSOMM actually is, again, the DevSecOps maturity model. And we'll get to what, in my opinion, is the most interesting part of the talk, which is operationalizing DSOMM. You know, a lot of these maturity models could be great in theory, but then we're left with the question, how do we implement it? And of course, we're going to talk about how to automate everything using open source tools. So what images come to mind when speaking of security maturity models? Don't worry, I won't put anybody on the spot here, but I think we can all agree that it does not sound like the most interesting thing in the world. But hold on. When implemented correctly, maturity models could bring a lot of value and a significant value to our organization. It could really help you make a difference in your organization, whether you're a CISO, a team lead, a developer. It doesn't matter. This could help you make an impact. And now I'm going to talk a little bit about those reasons and the values, just to cover that as well. So the first value is translation to leadership. It's very common for technical personas to have a hard time speaking and explaining to non-technical leadership persona. Because, you know, nerd to nerd, we're fine, we understand each other, we speak the same language, but we need to be able to explain things to non-technical leadership personas. Maturity models could really help you do that, right? Because you're using metrics, you're using numbers, which are those maturity levels that we're going to talk about soon. And we can really come forward and say, like, hey, we're at this level, let's say level 1, and we want to get to level 2 and 3, and this is what we need to do, and this is the benefit of doing this. It's basically just finding a shared language. Current state analysis. We spend a lot of time and money bringing in consultants and doing internal analysis. And using maturity models, you can do it. You can do the analysis, and you can see where you are from a security perspective, all in the same swoop. Gap prioritization. This is not rocket science, right? You just need to identify your gaps and give them priorities. Current state analysis and gap prioritization really help put everything into context, which again is really helpful for the translation to leadership. Tools and automation. We have to automate. If a process is not automated, it's not going to last, it's going to die. And maturity models can show us like current state, we're doing okay. But this is a manual process, and this is what it's going to take to automate it. Resources needs. This is really important. Like, we're doing this right now at this level, but we want to be here. Now, these are the skill sets that we need, and these are the resources that we need to get there. This, again, all helps with the translation to leadership. And last, but definitely not least, it's probably the most important one, this is risk exposure. We need to understand where the risks are, and we need to understand the level of those risks. So, hopefully this is making more sense now, and you kind of got with me on the theme, like maturity models are not that bad. It could actually bring us a lot of value. Now let's talk about the leading maturity models out there. The first one is NIST. I'm sure many of you are familiar with it. NIST is quick to say, like, we're not a maturity model, but it sure looks like one and acts like one in terms of the different levels that we see. They have some great publications out there. Feel free to check it out and see if you can utilize them in order to see where you are from a security perspective. Next, we have CMI. Now, this is really levels, right? We see level 1 through 5, but we do need to put some effort here in translating this, because you see initial. What does initial mean to me, and how can I connect this to how my organization is doing and operating? Now, it's good on the levels, but it's tough on the translation for CMI. Next, we have SCA, Cloud Security Alliance. This is a bit similar. We do love the fact that they've translated those steps, the level 1 through 5, to fit the specific areas of cloud security. But still, it's a bit more broad than what we want, and it doesn't really get into the DevOps and the DevSecOps perspective. And the last one is OWASP-SAMM. Now, shout out to OWASP-SAMM. We do love it. And DSOMM actually borrows a lot from OWASP-SAMM, but it's a bit too rigid for us. It's not as flexible, and it's not as agile as we wish to have. All right. So, why do we like DSOMM at JIT? We utilized DSOMM and integrated it into our development organization. We have some intakes based on the work that we've done here, and the reasons that we've ended up with are, first of all, it's open source, right? We love open source tools. We think they're the future. We know they're the future. I think most of us can agree on this. This is pretty much why we're here. But we like DSOMM because it was actually built by the community, and it's different than something that was built to sell, for example. It's developer-owned. It's called the DevSecOps maturity model. We look at ourselves as a high-performing or elite team in terms of velocity, and DSOMM is really all about developers. Automation and tooling. There is integration from DSOMM into different open source tools, which is very helpful for us. It helps us identify the areas that we need and we want to automate, and we can see it more clearly across our life cycle. And the last one, stakeholders' value. DSOMM brings value to our developer, it brings value to our team leads, and it brings value to our leadership. Again, the translation to leadership, this is super important for us. A bit about DSOMM. DSOMM was built by a very nice guy called Timo Pegel. You can see him here. It was built in 2017. It's really focused on security and DevOps strategies. It's based on the need for security prioritization for developers. Timo built DSOMM with a simple realization of, I don't have any way to rate how my organization is doing from a DevSecOps perspective. The project is posted on the OWASP page. You can scan this QR. It would take you straight there, and it will show you the link to the GitHub repo as well. This is a view of DSOMM. You see that it's kind of a bullseye shape. Now, this shape, along with the circular pattern, this is how DSOMM measures maturity. And you can see right away the difference from the waterfall CMI that we've seen in the beginning. And all of the layers here are specific to software development. Each of those layers are built by dimensions and subdimensions. The dimensions are build and deployment. We have culture and organization, implementation, information gathering, and test and verification. One thing I want to say, and we're not going to talk about it today, but DSOMM actually provides mapping to ISO controls, so it really helps with compliance. So this is another benefit as well to use DSOMM. This is a better view of DSOMM. Don't feel the pressure to read anything. You can see here that we have the dimension, build and deployment, and we have subdimensions, build and deployment, and within each of the subdimensions, we have the 4 maturity levels. So it's really important to just artificially choose 4 levels, because in some cases, TIMO actually collapses in those levels. So you can reach level 3 and also reach level 4. In some cases, you have level 1 and level 2 combined. So in some cases, you really have to comply to only 3 levels. But you do have the maximum of 4. I know that recently they've created the 5th level, but it's actually just the 4th level that just split. So don't worry, it's 4. All right, so I hope you are alive, because this was kind of an overview, and I hope this is making more sense now in terms of why we like it and how is it different from the other maturity models out there. So for this talk, we're going to talk about implementation and test and verification dimensions. We're not going to go over each of their subdimensions as well, because we don't have enough time for this today. But I do have to say, like, culture and organization and information gathering, they're still super important. But this is what we thought was the first cut. Like, this is the first step that we need to take in order to improve our maturity across the board. Again, don't feel the pressure to read anything. We're going to start with the first one, with the first dimension. We're going to go a bit slower now, and then just to get you guys started, and then we're going to go faster for the next ones. So the first one is implementation dimension and application hardening subdimension. So we have the 3 levels here. The first level is consider security explicitly during the software requirements process. The second one is increased granularity of security requirements derived from business logic and known risks. The third one is mandate security requirements process for all software project and third-party dependencies. I know this is a lot of buzzwords and it's hard to understand, and we will break this down a bit, so don't feel any pressure that you don't understand, and if you don't understand. So the way that it's broken down here is that we see that we have those 2 work streams. We have the software requirements and we have the supplier security. This is not surprising that supplier security is separated due to all of the supply chain attacks that we see. All right, so we see this, but how do we operationalize it, right? From theory to enforcement. The way that we looked at it is that we have to keep things simple. There is a lot to cover in DSOMM. It could be very complicated. We saw all of the buzzwords there. So we just said, okay, let's build a flow, and we'll work by this flow for every dimension and subdimension that we're going to go over. So the flow that we chose is that, first of all, we need to understand the risk. Then we need to map the security requirements, which are what are the action items that we need to take. Then we need to understand what tools we want to automate, and then we need to test it. So looking at maturity level 1 from a software perspective, high-level application security objectives are mapped to functional requirements. The objectives is that we want to prevent stealing of any code and data from our application. So the action items that we need to take here is that we want to scan our code for vulnerabilities, and we want to scan our code for hard-coded secrets. From a supplier perspective, evaluate the supplier based on organization security requirements. And how do we do it? All software libraries are updated with vulnerability remediated. The action item here is that we need to scan our code dependencies for vulnerabilities. Okay, now we have our 3 action items. And we need to find the best open source tools for the mission. Now, this is really the fun part for us. Again, we love open source. It's truly a community power. And all of the tools could be utilized in order to help you reach those goals and enable DSOMM within your organization. I am going to share just the tools that we chose at General, the open source tools that we're automating, just to kind of cover that. So we're using Trivi, Bandit, Kubescape, SamGrep, GoSec. We're using Prowler, Zap, Nancy, Kix, and OSV, and we're constantly adding more and more. Now, if we're going back to the application hardening subdimension, we have the 3 action items, and we need to implement the matching tools that we chose. So for code scanning for vulnerabilities, we're using GoSec for Go. We're using SamGrep for Python, Java, JavaScript, TypeScript, Kotlin, Scala, C#. And for dependency scanning, we're using OSV scanner for Python and PHP. We're using Nancy for Go. And we're using NPM audit for JavaScript, TypeScript, Node.js, basically everything that is JavaScript-based. And the last action item here is hard-coded secret detection, and we're using GitLeaks, which has support for multiple languages. So we covered the first maturity level. We're moving on to level 2. Again, we see the 2 areas here. So from a software perspective, we need to have structured security requirements that are available and utilized by developer teams. We achieve that just by using those tools that I've showed you before. We integrated them into our development process. So we're there. We have maturity level 1 and 2 just by using those tools. From a supplier perspective, build security into supplier agreements in order to ensure compliance with organizational requirements. Now, we're not quite there yet. It gets into a bit more manual process, supplier agreements. I know that there are tools out there. I'd love to hear your feedback if you have any recommendations. But for us, this is just a bit of a back and forth with our suppliers just to get them to comply with our third-party security pieces. For maturity level 3, from a software perspective, build a requirements framework for product teams to utilize. Again, by utilizing those open source tools, this gives us our framework, but we do have to understand what are the tools that make sense for us. But we feel like we're there. We have maturity level 3. From a supplier perspective, ensure proper security coverage for external suppliers by providing clear objectives. Again, a bit of a manual process for us and a back and forth with our suppliers. All right, so that completes the first subdimension for us for today. And we saw how we kind of climbed up those levels, those maturity levels for us, and hopefully this is making more sense of how to better utilize and use everything with open source tools. So up next is development and source control subdimension. We're still under implementation dimension. For level 1, source control protection and versioning, the action item for this one, SCM implementation through GitHub. Level 2 and 3 are collapsed here, so it's pre-commit checks and validations. The action items for this one is that we need to enable the code scans from the application hardening subdimension, and we need to enable or enforce branch protection. And for maturity level 4, this is shifting left all the way, right? We're talking about IDE extensions, and we're talking about local linters. So how do we do it? For maturity level 1, we simply want to use GitHub. I realize it's not as easy for everyone as it was for us, but we're a startup, we're all in AWS, and we're using all of our repos in GitHub. I know that other companies might have legacy or on-prem, but for us, it was a straightforward way to achieve this requirement. For levels 2 and 3, we just talked about all of the code scanning tools that we're utilizing. We also enabled branch protection, so we've got those, boom, we're there as well. For maturity level 4, we're there as well. We've developed a VS Code extension that run the code scanning tools locally on the developer's IDE. Our extension is not open source, but it's free and it's open to use. There are other great security IDE extensions, so you can just choose what's right for you. There is one more subdimension that I'm not going to talk about today, but it's worth mentioning, infrastructure hardening. See, he's strong. But I do want to share with you some of the open source tools that we utilize in order to get all the levels here as well. So for container scanning and Kubernetes scanning, we're using Trivia and Kubescape. For cloud security and infrastructure as code, we're using Prowler for AWS, GCP, and Azure. And we're using Kix for Pulumi, CloudFormation, AWS CDK, Terraform, and serverless. Great. So now let's talk about another dimension, tests and verification. And we're going to start with application tests subdimension. Again, for this one, we're not going to go over all of the subdimensions, so I'm just putting it out there. So we see that maturity level 1 and 2 are combined, so we jump straight to level 2. Level 2 is security units test for important components. The action items that we need to take here is that we need to have code scans on all the repos, which we're doing, and we need to have infrastructure scans across production. We also talked about the open source tools that we're using for infrastructure scanning. Maturity level 3, this is security integration tests for important components. This is basically pen testing and web application scans. Now, for this one, we used Cobalt. Cobalt is not an open source tool, but it's a pen testing community. And we use them basically for compliance. But there are other great equivalents out there like Zap. Zap is one of the most powerful pen testing tools out there. So you can just find something that works for you. Level 4, this is high coverage of security-related module and integration tests, smoke tests. So we basically need to have stability and functionality testing that is integrated into the development processes. We did this by using Selenium scripts for our smoke tests. So this was a kind of a short subdimension. And the next subdimension is consolidation. Now, I really like this one because it feels like it's kind of bringing everything together. So if we're looking at the levels, for level 1, we have definition of quality gates, simple false positive treatment, treatment of defects with severity higher. The action items for this one is that we need to implement and enforce code, infrastructure, pipeline, and third-party scans for each PR. We need to implement branch protection and require approval before merging a PR. We need to have a process to review false positives. And we need to triage all of the high and critical vulnerabilities. So again, by using the open source tools and by checking all of the boxes here, we can make sure that we have level 1 fully covered. For level 2, this is simple visualization of defects. For this one, we basically want to have a dashboards and reports for vulnerabilities backlog, and we want to have vulnerabilities per PR. Maturity level 3, this is integration of vulnerability issues into the development process. We need to have treatments of defects with moderate severity, and we need to have usage of vulnerability management system. This, again, shifting left, right? We see the integration of vulnerabilities into the development lifecycle. The action items for this level is that we need to triage all of the moderate and highs. We need to track, manage, and reports on vulnerabilities. And one of the most important things is the developer perspective. We need to integrate those scans into the PR process. And if we find any vulnerability, we need to comment on the PR, right? So just like a developer gets a code review from his peer, he needs to get a security review. If we find anything, just leave a comment. This basically means that we need to utilize disciplines like GitOps, and we need to enforce those policies, but this is a talk by itself. Now, for maturity level 4, this is advanced visualization. So we basically need to have tickets, and we need to handle all of the defects. The action items for this one is that We need to have detailed vulnerabilities with RCA. We need to handle all the levels of the vulnerabilities. And this makes level 4 achieved and all of this subdimension completed. Awesome. So there are a lot more subdimensions, and you can achieve all of them just by using the open source tools that we've talked about. I just really wanted to give you a taste of DSOMM because I know it can be hard and kind of overwhelming just starting to think about maturity models, like where do we start? But I believe that utilizing open source tool, this is a great way to start. You can easily see how you can achieve this different level for DSOMM just by using the tools. Now, if we want to kind of sum up here, then I want to circle back to the values and the benefits that I mentioned at the beginning. Because looking at all of the maturity levels across the dimension, we can see how everything is coming back to those values. We talked about the tools that we want to automate and use. Those tools are here to show us all of the vulnerabilities that we have. This connects to risk exposure because we know where the risks are and we know the levels of them. The dashboards and reporting can help us with the current state analysis. This can help us understand our gaps. This all leads to resources needs because we know what we need to do in order to climb up those maturity levels. And when we know that, we can explain what we need in order to climb up. So again, this helps us with the translation to leadership. All of those metrics help us create the simple language to translation to leadership so we can actually be able to explain. Now, this brings us kind of to the end of everything, to the end of the talk. And I hope this was helpful to really understand the different levels and how we're thinking about it at JIT. Now, this is my shameless plug here. I hope that no one would kill me. But I just wanted to share JIT as an example of how we implemented the stuff, how we implemented DSOMM in our dev organization. Because the way things are working for many companies, this is basically a manual process, right? You have Excel sheets with all the vulnerabilities. This is hard to handle. And we talked about the importance of automating. This is not going to last, and this is not scalable. We're automating everything in our platform. We have an automated backlog. We're automating the process of utilizing all of those open source tools. This is a huge amount of tools. And we're doing this in order to enable DSOMM. Now, if this is interesting to you and you want to know more, I encourage you to just check out our website. We're free to teams up to 10 developers. Please feel free just to scan this QR or visit us at jit.io. Feel free to reach out to me. This is my email. You can reach out via LinkedIn as well. And I really do appreciate the opportunity to talk with you guys today. I'll happily answer any questions you may have during the break, and we have the pub. So thank you, everybody, for your time. And if you want to win AirPods 3, you can scan this QR and join the raffle. And by the end of this event, I'll do the raffle here, and I'll give it out. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much, Raz. Right. Since Raz decided to take questions during the break, we are going to have a 10-minute break right now. So the toilets are over there and on the right. There's still food available. Please grab some food. Treat yourself to some swag from our swag table, and we'll see you in 10 minutes for the second talk, which is on AI. We're about to restart. Can you please take your seats? Please take your seats. We have the second talk about artificial intelligence, cutting-edge AI, and how you can use it to secure your applications. Please take your seats. You will all have a chance to catch up and talk during the drinks after the event, and there will still be food available. Please take your seats. Please take your seats. We're about to restart. All right. I'd like to introduce to you our next speaker. Now, next speaker is Matt Adams, who is a security architect at Santander, UK. He is a highly experienced security architect with nearly 20 years of professional experience in cybersecurity. So before Santander, Matt worked at Costa Coffee, so looking after cybersecurity there. And they led the architecture and engineering teams as well, and played a crucial role in defining global information security strategies. So Matt brings a lot of insightful perspectives on emerging technologies and their potential to reshape cybersecurity landscape. And Matt's been busy creating some fantastic open source projects which utilize the power of generative AI for cybersecurity. Welcome, Matt.
Thanks very much, Sam, for the introduction. I'll just say now, just while I'm setting up, there'll be quite a lot of like actual user interfaces and a bit of code as well. So if you'd feel a bit more comfortable closer to the stage, then by all means feel free to move down. The screen is pretty big though, so you might be fine. Okay. So just a bit of an agenda for the talk. Be starting off with some introductions and objectives. We'll then be going on to 3 live demos, just because I like a bit of a challenge. And we'll be then moving on to think about how you can look at your own use cases, come up with some ideas for your own use cases in your own businesses. And then when you come to implement those use cases, I've got some thoughts on some best practices when it comes to generative AI based on my own experiences to date. And then we'll wrap up with a bit of Q&A as well, or equally happy to take questions in the pub afterwards. So as Sam said already, I work as a security architect at Santander UK. I've been there for about 16 months. And that's part of a broader career journey of, as Sam said again, nearly 20 years, where I started out as a consultant with Deloitte's cybersecurity practice, moved on to be a contractor for a few years, working across various financial services and other industries. And then more recently, I was the global security architect for Costa Coffee, and bringing right up to date with joining Santander last year. And when I'm not working, I have a few different hobbies to keep things interesting. So I live on a 10-acre small holding in North Buckinghamshire. So at my weekends, I'm shearing sheep and rounding up any escaped pigs that happen to be about on the farm. And I also enjoy tinkering away in my home lab. So you'll find various assortments of like Arduinos and Raspberry Pis and things. And that kind of necessitates some coding. And that's some of what's brought me to generative AI as well, because I found that what used to take me a couple of days, I can now do in a couple of hours. And I've tried to extrapolate that to see how we can apply it in business and how we can get those benefits across a broader set of people. So the objectives for this talk, number one, show you some tools, give you some ideas, and hopefully raise some awareness of the practical applications for this generative AI technology that's been in the news so much. What I'm not going to talk about, it's not going to be an intro to generative AI. I think there's probably been enough out there in the news, the media and other talks doing like generative AI 101. I'm not going to talk about the security risks associated with LLMs. Please go and look at the OWASP top 10 for LLMs released this week. It's a great resource for that. I'm also not going to cover, as part of the use cases, the chat with documents use cases that you'll see, which is, I give a set of documents to create a custom knowledge base, and I chat with those documents to get answers. Those, don't get me wrong, those are incredibly valuable and I think really useful, and loads of organizations will be doing that. But today I wanted to push the envelope a little bit to show you what I've been experimenting with. Okay, so use case number 1, threat modeling. This is something that I know from experience. When you have a security professional in the room, it can go really well. If you don't have a security professional there, I've seen fairly mixed results. Sometimes application development teams, unless they've been through the process before, don't necessarily understand or really get to the depth of what's required. And so what I started to think about was, is there a way that we can use generative AI to provide almost like a security person in the room for those developers? And so that's when I came up with Stride GPT. So sort of looking behind the scenes, and we'll demo the tool in a little while, the things that I think make this interesting from a generative AI standpoint is that we're not using a chat GPT-like interface. So it's not a chat interface model. What we're doing, or what I'm doing, is taking a number of values that we capture from the user, so an application description, the types of authentication methods for the application, etc., and we're stuffing that into a broader prompt template, and it's that prompt template that provides the consistency of the threat modeling experience. So you may have encountered some of this when you've used ChatGPT, when you ask it to take on a specific persona, like be a security expert, be a marketing SEO expert, but you always have to sort of prepend your query with that. The benefit of using these prompt templates is that the user doesn't have to think about any of that. They just have to put in their application description, stuff they know, and the application will take care of the rest. So then as I said, we take all of that information along with the prompt template, and we pass that as a formatted prompt to the OpenAI API in this case. And another interesting feature that I wanted to call out was, more recently, as I've been adding more functionality in, I've then been trying to improve the consistency of the outputs that I get back from the language model. So unless you're quite specific, one of the joys of working with LLMs, and in fact, as we might see demoing LLMs, is that you'll never get the same response twice unless you work pretty hard at your prompt engineering. And that can be down to like individual words, or it can be the entire structure. So if I ask it to create a threat model, on one hand, it will produce a very nice structured report. The next time round, it might produce something quite different. And that's where, as we'll go on to look at the code, and you can look at the code on my GitHub repos, you'll see that there's quite a lot of effort gone into the prompts to push the language model down a certain direction when it comes to formatting the output. And the latest thing I've added is this use of JSON objects. So by using that, and it turns out that the OpenAI models are amazingly good at JSON, actually, you can then get the outputs back in a structured format, which means you can pass them out later on, which is incredibly useful, as you'll see. You can play with the app as well. If you want to, please don't all go there at once, just while I'm demoing it. I don't know what the Streamlit cap is, but we'll have a look at that now anyway. Okay, yep, so that's definitely big enough. So there's a couple of things that you need to provide. One is your OpenAI API key. and also the model that you want to use. For this demo, we'll use GPT 3.5 Turbo because it's just a bit quicker than GPT-4, but that model is available for you to select as well. And then this is the information that we provide about our application. Just for demo purposes and getting people quickly up and running, I provide an example application description that we can use. And this is a fairly straightforward description. You can go into more detail when you're doing it yourself. The application retains no data. I don't log anything on the back end. You can look at the code. But generally with large language models, you'll find that the more you put in, the more you'll get out, because what you're doing by providing the additional context is you're triggering different parts of that model to then be able to retrieve and give you the benefit of that later on. So you see we're describing the application, a React front end, Node.js back end, MongoDB. We're using OAuth 2, and we've made some notes that it's a note-taking and sharing application, so nothing revolutionary. So we know it's a web app already, but there is the ability to select different options. It is, of course, internet-facing, and I've had some feedback from people that have used this to say, could you change it to be the modern, the current government classification scheme? It's not what I'm trying to do with this. It's really just to give an indication to the language model of how sensitive the data might be, and so you could even put none in here and then add your own additional description up top if you've got your own classification scheme, but it seems to work fairly well, and it's sort of generic enough for the language model to understand. So we did say we had OAuth 2. We'll also say we've got basic authentication, and we'll say that we're not storing our privileged accounts in a PAM tool. So the first step is we'll go and generate our threat model. So again, this isn't trying to be perfect on the first try. It's really trying to give people a leg up on the threat modeling process and to hopefully get them to understand what we mean as security professionals when we talk about threat modeling. So we now have our Stride threat model. I'll zoom out a little bit. So you see that it's picked up each of the threat types. It's then generated a scenario, and it's picking up some of the information that we provided. So it is pulling in the relative context to provide that into our threat list. And then we've got a description of the potential impact as well. What I've also asked the model to do is, in order to get more benefit from this as people use it more, is to provide some improvement suggestions to the user, which says you could improve your application description, and if you do that, I'll be able to provide you with more detail, more value, and so that's what this section is doing here. And you've got the ability to download the outputs in a markdown format. What we can also then do is we can generate some potential mitigations for those threats that have just been identified. So this is where we're then taking that list of threats that was produced, and we're looking for the first part of that JSON object, and then we're taking that and we're returning that back to the language model with a prompt which says, please generate some mitigations, and you'll see that we've got our list of suggested mitigations. So something that would probably take my colleagues and I a couple of hours to work through, and we've been able to do in a few minutes. So that's Stride GPT. Please give it a try and have a look at it. I will just show you the prompt template so you can get an idea of how that looks on the back end. So this is the one that we use for the threat model template, and you can see this is where all of the context in terms of you should act as a cybersecurity expert. We're really trying to tap into that idea of expertise and experience within the language model. And then this is where we're capturing the parameters that you'll have seen from the drop-down boxes. All of that then gets combined before it then gets passed to the model. And you can see then I've advised it that it should provide it in a very specific output format so that it's possible to then go on and generate those mitigations during that second step that I showed. Okay. Right, use case 2. This one's quite interesting and was, sorry, question, yeah.
So, for the mitigations, are you just feeding its own scenarios back into the LLM to generate those?
Yeah. So if we went down to the mitigations template, that will again say, you are a cybersecurity expert. I can't quite remember what I put in there, but it would have been something similar to, again, tap into that idea of expertise and experience. But otherwise, it would have been generic, apart from the fact we've taken the threat list that it generated in the first stage, which is, again, based on the information that the user provided about their application. And that idea of passing information back through different instances of the model, this extends that idea, which is why I wanted to show it, because this is where we can actually take different personas and use them to achieve more than we can with just a single persona. So some key features to note here. We're going to show a simulated conversation between two different AI personas. One is a writer persona that's tasked with generating some security awareness content. And the second is an editor persona that will review and critique the output from the first persona. And what that allows is two things, really. We get some additional focus from the language model. So by just tasking each instance of the model with one job, you allow it to specialize and focus a lot more and to produce a higher quality output. And we can also then create this iterative process of improvement that you'll see where that reflection and critiquing hopefully leads to a better output than you would have got on the first try around. And I'm not going to show it today, but one of the occasions I've used this was to write some code for a simple web application. And if you ask ChatGPT to give you some code for a Flask web app, it will do it, but it will be very focused, unless you've told it otherwise, it will be very focused on the functional aspects of that web app. If, however, you combine that with a second persona that's a security reviewer, you get some quite interesting interactions because the security reviewer will start talking about things like cross-site request forgery tokens and anti-DDoSing measures, which you would have never got from the original persona by itself. So I think this is quite powerful. Please, again, the code's there. Go and play with it. It's very easy to customize. Have a quick flick through. Look at the different persona descriptions. Look at the prompts that are set, look at the different goals, and you can tweak them to your own ends, which makes it, I think, really, really powerful. And obviously, we're using multiple personalities here, so there's a nod to Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. So you'll see this in the code in a minute, but what you'll witness is the user specifying a subject, and then we have this orchestrator Python script, which first passes the subject and a prompt to the writer bot to say, go and write some content about this subject. The writer bot is then going to call the OpenAI API, which is then going to return some drafted content, which then gets passed over to the editor bot, which does its role using the prompt. And we'll go through a couple of iterations of that. Okay. So this is fairly script-orientated. There's only a couple of command line arguments that I'm passing in. So one is the location of the API key that I'm using, and then there's a subject that gets passed in as well, which in this case, DevSecOps best practices. and then we'll start the conversation running between these two bots. This will take a few seconds, so I'm happy to take any questions. Oh, it's been pretty quick, though. No. OK. So this is then the first response that we've got from WriterBot, and it's starting to write some security awareness material about our chosen subject. Now we'll wait for EditorBot to look at that, and then it will start to, we should have, yeah, some review comments. So it's then saying, you could benefit from more examples, further explanation. You could emphasize certain aspects. And then WriterBot is again coming back with a revised piece, and it's actually providing some responses to EditorBot to tell it how it's addressed the original feedback. And then again, we're going into that second review cycle. Yeah, so it's identified point one now includes an example of implementing security as code. And overall, the revised article is clearer, more informative. So I think EditorBot's pretty happy at this point. And then we have one more pass. So you can let this carry on indefinitely, but in my experience, it's better to give yourself an exit point. So we'll say yes. And then this is where we go into this final phase where we're taking the content that's been written by WriterBot and the latest version of that content. We're again putting it back to the OpenAI API model, and we're saying draft a final piece, and we want it in HTML just to provide some formatting to make it a bit more visually interesting.
Sorry, can I just ask a question?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so just for my understanding, you're saying you're using effectively two instances of OpenAPI, and they're just talking to each other?
So
Using just two different profiles?
Yes. Yeah. So there's two instances set up. They're both GPT 3.5 Turbo. It's just that the prompt templates we're using are different. And so when we're going through this phase, we're taking the feedback and the current version of the content, so basically like the chat history, effectively, and then sending it to that and saying, this is your latest feedback, please respond to that, which it knows that it needs to do that. It goes through that writing process, and again, it then hands it back to EditorBot. Its prompt template says, you need to review this, and you need to provide a critique and update back. And then there's some logic in this script which says, once you've done that a couple of times, we've been through enough cycles, give the user the option to exit at that point.
Cool.
I think, but just to enhance that, are they both using the same OpenAI key in the same model?
Yep.
Okay, so have you tried splitting them, saying one using ChatGPT 3.5, another 4, or this project at the moment supports both to be the same?
So I did try that with the coding bot, because GPT-4 is generally better at coding. So yes, you can absolutely vary that, and you'll be able to see in the code where that's called out, and it's fairly easy to update.
Just go here.
Hi. Have you tried to use different models like Claude or anthropomorphic, and tried, because the data sets are different and at different times, and specifically for big data sets, for example, Claude has given me better result, and feeding it back retrained better the local tree of GPT-4 for specific thing, for example, classification or other stuff. Have you tried that?
Not something I've tried, but absolutely there's no reason why you couldn't do that, because you would just, when you're creating your different versions. You just tell one to use OpenAI, one to use Anthropic. There's no different, or even an open source model.
Yeah, Llama. Thank you.
Yeah.
One more question. One second.
Sorry. Yeah.
Hi. Given ChatGPT's occasional propensity to, for lack of a better word, make stuff up, what is your confidence that it's actually acting accurately upon this writing, editing cycle? Because, from my own experience of using ChatGPT, it can write something that looks very convincing until you start digging down into it, and then you just realize it's inventing stuff. And quite famously, some lawyers got rather burnt by it when it invented some previous cases that actually did not exist and had never existed, and they submitted it in court and got into quite a lot of trouble about it, actually. How confident are you that it's actually being accurate with this editing?
So what I'll say is that, yes, that is definitely an issue, and I said I wasn't going to talk about security risks, so I don't want to sort of break my own objectives. There are some tips at the end that I'll cover that do help to address that. This process, though, actually, in my experience, improves that problem, because you'll have found that even just by asking ChatGPT, can you reflect on what you just gave me, it will go, oh no, of course I was wrong. And in this instance, that's what the editor bot is doing, or whatever reviewer persona you're doing, but you can automate that by having this time scripted approach. So yes, I would still hazard that there are going to be inaccuracies in there. I have seen, for example, the editor bot will say, oh, it would be great if you could have some statistics in there. Well, of course, it's going to fabricate statistics, because unless it's in the training data, it doesn't actually know. But again, the idea of these tools and the way I think of them is that it gives you 80% of what you need. So if you're somebody that needs to write an article for your security awareness newsletter on what DevSecOps is, this is going to give you 80% of the content in 1% of the time. So your time is better spent fact-checking that, for want of a better term, and looking for those problems that you as a human can pick up. And then, so finally, we asked it for some HTML output. This is always interesting to see the colors it picks up. Okay, it's pretty conventional. But yeah, I think I asked for that in Tailwind, and it's done that. And so you can take that. You can provide your own templates. Obviously, you'd be more specific. You'd say, I want this specific block of HTML, this particular CSS, and I think just on a scan, it's done a fairly good job at nailing what we might want from a DevSecOps piece of security awareness. Okay, use case 3. So this is where, in the last couple of weeks, I've really tried to explore what's possible when we stop using personas. We still use personas, but this idea of autonomous agents that you might have seen. So there's like AutoGPT, a couple of others as well. The scope of those tools, in my opinion, is just too broad at the moment. The models aren't powerful enough. But if you can narrow it down and give the model a specific set of tools to work with, you'll see, I think, that actually it's pretty compelling as a way of getting some work done. So what this demo does, the things to look out for, I'm going to provide a description of some scans that I want to perform as a security analyst or junior pen tester. But I don't know any of the command line arguments that I need. I might not even know the names of the tools that I actually need to run. It doesn't matter. The agent, based on the description, will look at the intent of the user, and it will decide which tools to run and the order that it's going to run them in order to achieve the goal that we've set it. And as a bit of an insight into what the agent's thinking, in inverted commas, there's a section in this tool that you can actually see the sort of decision-making process, if we can call it that, going on, which I think is quite interesting. And when we think about sort of checking language models and the accuracy of their output, I think that type of feature is quite important so that you can have an expert look at what the agents are doing and what the language models are doing and verify that. Okay, come back to that in a minute. Okay, another Streamlit app. So this one. So under the hood, what I've done is given the language models the ability to drive a shell, which is dangerous, and I wouldn't recommend doing it on your own machine. So this is running on a DigitalOcean droplet, and it's targeting another DigitalOcean droplet in the same subnet, because that just cuts out any of the network latency problems. And I also know that it's not going to go off and scan anything else. So yeah, by all means, try out this similar approach at home, but I wouldn't run it on your main computer, just in case the language model returns some interesting commands. So what we'll do now is we'll just give it, we'll say we want a very fast Nmap scan. And we'll run that. And then this is the section that you can see. So you see, right, we've got the T4 flag, so we want really quick, because that's what the user asked for. And you'll see, yeah, so in the thought, since we need to perform a very fast Nmap scan, we should use the appropriate Nmap command that prioritizes speed. So I didn't need to know about the T4 flag. I didn't need to know about the F flag. It just went and picked that. But I can go and verify that through providing this view of the code. And then we get some output here, which says I've completed it, and I found that port 22 is open, 25, and port 80. So what I'll do is we'll clear those scan results out, and we'll make this a little bit more interesting for the model. So we'll say we want, okay, so I've not mentioned any tools. I've cleared out the previous results, so at this point, the language model has no context. It doesn't know we performed that previous scan. It does know that it's got access to Nmap, because in the code I've said, if you need to run something called a network scan, use this tool. And as you'll see, it's also got access to a couple of other tools as well. So this time we didn't ask for a very fast scan, but we did ask for a network scan. So it's just running the basic Nmap commands. And we know that it's going to find a web server because we're scanning the same target, and that had port 80 open. But it has identified again that port 80 is open. And so it's now going to run a web server scan using Nikto. So again, I didn't tell it which tools to use. I didn't tell it anything about how to structure the commands. But it's performed that scan, and it's identified, as Nikto is bound to do, what's running on the host. And then what we can do for that is we can take the output from both tools, and we can, again, pass that to the language model, get it to generate a nice report for us that we can then say that our day of junior pen testing is done for that day, and we can go to the pub. So just while that's generating, we'll go back to look at this process. So what you're seeing is we've described those scans. So it's a lang chain agent. If any of you have played around with any of these frameworks that are used to interact with LLM, I think lang chain's a really good option for prototyping. And it's that agent that's deciding, based on the prompt that we've given it or the description, which tools get used. It then sends the tool description or the tool that we've chosen to the OpenAI API. That will then say, okay, we want to run Nmap. We should use that TF flag or T4 flag or anything else, depending upon the requirements. We then temporarily store those results. And at this point, the agent decides, did I meet all of the things that the user asked me for? Or should I run another tool? And so that's what you saw in that second run, was that identified it still needed to complete the web application scan, and that's where it picked Nick to. And I've picked these tools because, for demo purposes really, because they're really quick, and so we're not hanging around. But there's no reason why you couldn't extend it to do a full ZAP scan or anything like that. So we're going through the final phase now, generating our reports. Again, we've seen it before a couple of times now, going to the language model and providing a report in our chosen format, which in this case is just straight back to Streamlit. So this is where we're seeing it's identified some of the issues. It's describing our methodology. And it's giving us some recommendations. And again, you should absolutely fact check this. You should verify it, run your own scan, look at the results. This isn't replacing any pen testers anytime soon, but I'm hoping that things like this will make people a lot more efficient when it comes to reporting and just cranking the handle on day-to-day tasks that we need to do. Okay. Yep, question.
Thank you. My question has to do with the data that is imported into ChatGPT. I mean, I think that you get a warning that you should not be putting anything there because it could leak. So it has more to do with privacy, I suppose. It's like how effective it can be, those tools can be used if there is the knowledge that it can be stored, that the information that you're putting in there could be stored.
Yeah, so I think your question was about the privacy concerns of using things like the OpenAI, like closed source model, sending it off to like a third party.
Whatever information you put in there,
yeah.
It's a real case or real life thing. How dangerous it can be.
Yeah, so how dangerous
yeah,
it is to put
absolutely.
real life IP addresses and vulnerabilities.
Yeah. So I think that's down to your individual risk appetite for your organization. My employer, we're not using OpenAI directly. We don't have a commercial relationship with them, but we do have access to other services that we can use language models on, and they've already got that commercial cover, the confidentiality agreements, etc. You can also use things like Hugging Face, which you might not have come across. Hugging Face is like the GitHub of machine learning. So if you want an open source model, you can find it on Hugging Face. They've got loads of different data sets and models that are trained for different purposes. And you can take those and deploy them onto a service like Amazon SageMaker. And that way you know that you're only talking to a model that you're hosting on your own infrastructure. And it may not be quite as good as or quite as capable as the GPT models, but you'll be addressing concerns about giving those actual scan results to a third party that you don't have a commercial relationship with. Okay. So having shown some use cases, I wanted to sort of give you some ideas about how I think about identifying use cases and how hopefully you can do the same. So the first thing, and this is my favorite way of thinking about it, is imagine I said, I've got a brand new intern for you, what would you have them do? And again, I like the idea of the intern because it's not your best red teamer. It's not going to be your most experienced security architect. It has, it's really good at written English, and it's pretty good at sort of verbal reasoning, but it's going to need some supervision. And so tasks that you can give to an intern to make your life easier, those are ideally suited for large language models and generative AI. All the better if they're repetitive and tedious tasks that people get bored of and lose focus on, but AI doesn't lose focus if your prompts are engineered correctly, because that's where you can really start to drive that automation. I'd also say that don't look for ways to replace people. As we've already touched on already, the language models aren't capable, really. They will hallucinate. They will generate strange output. But what they can do really well is to make processes and teams work faster. And so you should be looking for opportunities to augment your existing teams with AI rather than thinking, I'm going to replace a particular resource or a type of resource within my business. And I'd also like any technology initiative, particularly when it's at this phase of sort of emerging technology, definitely start small with a well-defined use case. I think it's tempting to, once your imagination's fired, think that's great, I'm going to start scanning everything in my estate, I'm going to pull together all of these reports. But it's much easier if you start with a small, well-defined use case and just use that as a springboard to demonstrate within your own organizations how well AI can do at some of these tasks. So when you come to implementing those use cases, I definitely say, again, start with the non-critical ones. Again, this idea of start small, don't use anything critical. Less sensitive data, or certainly non-sensitive data, would be ideal. We definitely have human-in-the-loop reviews. So we've talked about this already. I could have taken those tools to the next level. I could have had the report finalized and emailed to the client. Everything could have been handled by the AI, but you probably want a human in that process to just do the final check before you hit the send button. If you're making decisions using or as part of your use cases, definitely monitor closely for bias. The models, the general models that you'll get, so like Claude or the GPT models, the vendors there have done a lot of work to try and remove the biases from those outputs. But if you're using a more specific model, so again, something from Hugging Face, for example, that's been trained on a quite small set of data, and you ask it a topic of some slightly related but not entirely aligned to what it's designed to output, you can get some pretty funky outputs. And you don't want to be making decisions on the back of that model's output. So it's important to have that human in the loop. It's important to be monitoring for bias in the output. I'd also say to understand how these things work, document your processes, good engineering principles, and track your performance. There's a really interesting tool that's just been released by the same team that developed LangChain. So they're calling it Langsmith. And with a couple of environment variables and a separate API key, you can actually get a view of what LangChain is doing behind the scenes, and it will even give you things like the latency of the calls, and you can see why your model is performing slowly. So that's a really interesting tool that's only come out in the last couple of weeks, and I'd expect to see more of those types of tools emerge as more organizations look to operationalize and put into production these types of technologies. I'd also say it's key to be transparent about the use of AI, particularly when you're using it as the front door, perhaps, to your security function. It's one of the use cases that we've talked about internally. We'd like to provide a consistent point of interaction for the security team to direct you to the correct team. But we're not going to pretend that that's a human because you're not trying to trick users, even though it's, you might want to make it seamless. It's far better to be upfront. And I think people are generally accepting of what the intention is of the teams that are implementing these technologies. And so you might as well just be transparent about it. When you're implementing the tools, I definitely keep track of the metrics as well. So when you've got those particular use cases, look at how many tickets you're resolving in a day using generative AI. Look at how many of your dev projects now have completed threat models for them. It all helps to sort of prove the value of this technology. Once you start to get into it, though, I think it's quite easy to over-rely on some of the outputs. Again, that idea of the human-in-the-loop interaction, not just taking everything the model produces as gospel, is really important. And I think for security professionals, that might come a bit more naturally than colleagues elsewhere in the business who see technology and expect it to work. This is a really interesting, cutting-edge area of computer science. And I think it's easy to look at it and go, it's infallible, and it's not. We know this from again from the OWASP top 10 that's come out this week. And I definitely don't see this technology going away. I think it's important that all organizations, if you're not already doing so, start to develop your own internal AI experts, because the real value from these technologies doesn't come from the sort of ChatGPT general knowledge answering. It's when you start to explore those specific use cases and start to use this technology to address the specific pain points within your business. And you're obviously people that need to know your business and know how to use these models in order to realize that to the full extent. So I'll finish up and ask if anyone's got any questions.
Thank you very much for an amazing talk, Matt. Let's give him a big round of applause.
Thank you.
Question? Go for it.
Hi, thank you very much for the presentation. Quite nice. I was wondering, could you describe any sort of difficulties you might have in implementing your implement?
Mm-hmm. Yep. So I will just dive into some of the code because I think that's quite instructive. So you can sort of see how much effort goes into pointing the language model down the right direction and turning it from a generalist into a specialist. So we've got 3 different things. We're asking when it's producing an attack tree, we want it using Mermaid. Mitigations template, again, we're dropped in that thing. And that's where the main challenges have come from, is that, like I said earlier, one of the interesting things about running live demos like this is that you never get the same output twice. It would be like if you and I sat down to write a report and we had the same starting information, we might broadly have the same headers in the document, but when it comes down to the individual wording or how we structure the tables, it's going to be different. If I give you more instructions, and I give both of us more instructions and say, I specifically want these 3 columns in those tables, and I want you to provide bullet points that cover these things, then we get a lot more consistency in the output. And that's really where most of my time is spent, is refining the prompts and the flows between the different tools. So I think there's, you end up with some interesting, so that's just another prompt template, but I'll show you like the editor role. apologies, this is going to be one long string. So we've been very clear, your role is to critique and improve security awareness materials. You should always analyze, and did I say always? No, you should analyze the content. I will often use things like words like always and be definitive. You must do this, because again, it's pushing the model to understand that you really do want it done, and that it doesn't have wiggle room. Otherwise, it will eventually find a way to provide that wiggle, and something will break in the output. Yeah. So yeah, that's sort of where the challenges have mostly lain, and yeah, a bit of an idea. But again, please look at the code, and you'll sort of see how things get built up.
Yeah, we have another question at the back. 1 second.
Hi. So assumingly, I said that I gave ChatGPT or GPT 3.5 instructions to follow a CRM, let's say, with certain data. What's the likelihood of it or ignoring my instructions and answering another question, like answering that question, but ignoring the fact that I have certain data to follow first?
Yeah. So you're talking about stuff that's technically known as retrieval augmented generation, or RAG. So that's where you provide a custom knowledge base, and you really only want answers from that knowledge base. You don't want it to interpret or hallucinate something else.
Sorry, excuse me, like, because I'm non-technical. That's why
no, that's
I
fine.
asked. But for my team, for the tech team, I'm just asking to keep in touch with them.
Yeah. So absolutely. So that's where again you use the prompts, the system prompts that aren't seen by the user. And I'm not doing it in here because it's not particularly critical. But I've developed other tools where I'll say, you must only reply with answers from that knowledge base. If you don't know, say that you don't know. And it's a really simple thing to say, and it's something that you would converse with a human about. But language models are a really different way of interacting with computers. And so things like that, while they're simple, they do make a tremendous difference to the output. And that problem of hallucination, again, it's really improved by just adding those simple phrases. And again, test, keep testing. And there are some good services out there, like the OpenAI service on Azure, for example. They've now given you the ability to upload your own documents to that. And you can test it out, and one of my things is I'll say, I'll ask a few questions about the data, and I'll say, why is the sky blue? Who is the current president, current president of the US? And what you want is not for it to have a go. You want it to come straight back and say, I don't know, it's not part of the data set. And so those tests are really key before you start pushing out to a wider group of users.
Great, thanks. Any more questions? No? Okay, thank you very much for the great talk. And just a reminder that this is an open source project, so all these wonderful tools you can find in Matt's repo, which is on screen right now. All you need is just the OpenAI key, is that right? The API key.
Yes, so for the Streamlit apps, so if you go to the GitHub repos, you'll see the public repos that are there. They've got full instructions on how to use each of the tools, and you can have a play around with them. Feel free to reach out to me as well on LinkedIn, and yeah, just thanks very much for coming on and listening.
Fantastic, thank you very much. Right, now it's time for the fun part of the evening. So those of you who submitted the entries to the raffle to win the AirPods, I'd like to invite Raz back on stage with a spinning wheel of fortune. And we'll see who is the lucky one who is going to go home. Well, I'll show them while you set up your laptop. There you go. These are the AirPods that one of you will be taking home today.
another screen. Yep.
All right. We can do DSOMM too if you want as well. Another presentation.
Do you want to plug in the sound as well? There's a sound, right? Balu! Where's Balu? All right, now the last few bits that I need to say. They're all about where to go next, right? And how to find out where the next event is on. Second. All right. Let's see if the screen works. Yes, again, if you want to get the NFT, please come and see me. I will have you scan my phone. So this is how you can follow us. One more time, take a picture if you don't know how to follow us, how to find out where and when the next event is going to be. Also, a big thank you to all our chapter supporters, including the hosts and sponsors of this event. Let's give them a big round of applause for a fantastic venue. Food and drink, microphone, screen, everything. This is not yet the end of the evening because we are now going to the pub, which is located at the back of the same building. So you have to leave this building, turn right, and you will find this place. This is called Four Quarters. This is a really cool bar because it has lots of arcade video games. So the geeks in you now can have a go at some amazing arcade stuff. And obviously the people from Licel, the hosts, Raz is also going to be around, and Matt, so our speakers will continue answering your questions. So please do network, exchange LinkedIn contacts, Twitter contacts, and we will see you next time. Thank you very much.